All right, I'm going to call a meeting of the Diamond Dogs here. Diamond Dogs, come together. All right. Now, no Roy here. He asked me to call this meeting. So, Roy, what you want to talk about today?
I'm a bit sick of being a Diamond Dog.
What?
And I'd like to withdraw my membership.
Hey, once you're a Diamond Dog, you're a Diamond Dog for life. Isn't that right, Coach Beard?
Yep. I don't know. He has quips.
Just one word broke the illusion of the skit. One word from Brian. Andrew didn't even get a chance. Andrew, where's your Nate impression? Give us a Nate.
Oh, I don't even know. Put me on the spot.
Exactly.
I just be like really soft spoken and kind of awkward.
Well, then do it. Go ahead. Give it.
Well, guys, I'm kind of sorry that I wasn't very kind to you, Ted. And can I still be part of the Diamond Dogs?
Oi.
That impersonation was worth the price of admission.
Except missing the British accent.
No, it was there. It was just hidden, behind the timidness.
Subtle.
That's what he does.
To any more visual things, if I'm going to be beard, like, I'm wearing a red thong.
Things are just stating that. All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and start the episode before things unravel much quicker. Hey, everyone. Welcome back to TV Guys, the show that's one man extra in a total football scheme. I'm Matt.
I'm Brian. That's my line.
I'm Paul.
And I'm Andrew.
And we've got our two special guests. We've also got something pretty great, is that there is a new title in town for show with the worst final season. Take that, How I Met Your Mother. And that's Ted Lasso. That's what we're talking about today. Am I alone in this, or are you guys with me on that?
Okay, you had mentioned, I was partway through the season, you had finished it, that it was terrible. And I thought I would hate the finale more than I did. I didn't hate the finale.
I actually loved the finale. The last season, I have issues with the last season. But I did love the finale. There were just so many great things in there that...
I think I like the third season better than the second season.
What? It's awful. I didn't care about any arc. The only one that was semi-interesting to me was the total football, like them getting better. Because I've wanted that since the beginning of the show, is a little bit of focus on the actual aspects of the football playing. And so they did have that this season, but everything else.
And that's what I liked, I think, most about this season was that they actually kind of got back to, coaching and showing more of the football scenes and that kind of that arc of the story. And I think that's why it resonated with me more, because that's what I wanted more of the show is, this is Ted Lasso. He's coaching soccer or football, whatever you want to call it, in England. And so that's what I want out of the show, right? And so that's why I think I like the season more than maybe other people did.
And this is exactly why I insisted that we have Andrew on this one too, because frankly, we need somebody else that actually cares about soccer. So
I'll admit soccer is important to the story.
I thought it was really cool, the soccer element.
So generous of you, Brian.
Just the silence after you say that is like indicative of soccer is good in the show. Thanks, Brian.
For the soccer football fans out there, we also got to have a guest appearance by Pep Guardiola, which was really cool. I thought that was really
great.
cool. They actually gave him lines too, which I thought was also, great. Other than I kind of was just expecting, just to see him and that was it. But
so remind me, who was that?
Was that the coach?
That's the Manchester City coach. I think there was a second to last episode that he was in.
Is that the one that Rupert pushed? No,
that's the one where they came back to win.
Oh,
they won it, and they won 2-0 with Jamie Tartt getting injured.
Oh, yeah.
And then he scores that goal right at the end of the game to go up 2-0.
Yeah.
And then Pep kind of tells him, hey, you got to take care of these guys, like just on the pitch and off the pitch type of thing.
Yeah,
And
that moment,
I'm sure Pep signed off on like, oh yeah, I'll do the episode and we can lose to Richmond because he still is going to win the league, which is what he does in real life every single season.
when he made that comment and it felt like it was, like after school special moment, I'm like, okay, this must be a real guy, because to give him that weight to some random actor wouldn't make sense.
He's arguably, he's top 3 coach right now in the world. Could be top 1. You could argue.
I think right now he's definitely the best. I think the only argument is he the best ever?
That's true. I can see that. Yeah,
so it's
nice that he has like unlimited
of soccer.
He's unlimited funds right now at Man City, which helps. But he is also a great coach as well. So you couple those two things together, you're gonna win stuff. And
all right, so speaking of some of these storylines here, because now we've talked about the one that I cared about, let's stay with the soccer theme. And I'm going to ask, when I introduce these story arcs that we'll talk about, I'm going to ask, what was the point of it? What was the point of Zava? Why did we have him in the show?
Ooh, see, I don't hate Zava.
I don't know. Earlier, maybe it would be like, if this hadn't already happened, maybe this could have been something that happened a season earlier to like show like Jamie Tart what kind of a full of himself he was, and by having an even worse person. But Jamie had already gone through that journey, so I'll admit, like, I don't know.
So I'll give you, and this is actually a soccer answer here, because like most of the stars that are characters in this show are based loosely off of real players. And even that, like Jason Sudeikis has even said that, a lot of these players are. So like Roy Kent, for example, is based off of Roy Keane, who's a famously notorious grumpy guy who's a pundit now, and was a player and got a lot of red cards. And then like Jamie Tart, for example, kind of a Jack Grealish type. He plays for Man City, of course. And then which actually was a little bit prescient, because I think when they started the series, he didn't play for Man City yet. And then the character of Zava is a clear ripoff of a real footballer known as Zlatan Ibrahimovic, who is exactly like that.
Yes.
And I think why his storyline was so important. If Richmond, so the idea of a team getting newly promoted and then contending for winning the league, that's an absurd notion. That literally never happens. The only thing that a team that gets newly promoted hopes to do is stay in the league. And so for that storyline to be a possibility, there has to be this transformational player. And so they needed the star. And so actually that one makes sense to me. There's a lot of other story arcs that I don't particularly love, but that one I liked.
See, I was with Brian when what he brought up, and this maybe is apparent. The football watchers are agreeing, and the non-football watchers are maybe agreeing. Where I think it would have helped this series, the season beforehand, to have a character like that. And again, it would be a good foil for Jamie. It would be a good way to show the group that it's like, this isn't a one-man sport; it's a team sport. And I don't think that they needed Zava to show them that, because I felt like the first 2 seasons were them coming together as a team. And I didn't feel like him showing up and then leaving was the like kick in the pants that I would have believed. I would have believed it had they still struggled at the beginning and come together around this new football philosophy that they introduced in episode 5 or 6 or whatever it was.
Yeah.
The thing is, though, like in the Premier League, you can't struggle early on in the season. Like you have to at least be decent. I mean, you can maybe go through a stretch of games where you lose a few, but like if you lose a bunch of games at the beginning, you're out. It's over.
Right, because at the beginning of the seasons, you really don't have the grind as the middle and the late part of the season in soccer, where a lot of these tournaments are going on. You've got more people that have gone off to, these international, breaks that they go on. Like, once you start playing like some of these high end teams, I mean, they're playing a lot of soccer, 2-3 games a week sometimes, depending on, the leagues or the tournaments they're still in. And the thing with Zava, which I agree, it's obviously based on like Zlatan, who's a big personality. I mean, he can back it up too. He's a phenomenal player. Like what Paul was saying is these newly promoted teams into the Premier League, all they want to do is stay up, because if they can stay up and they can get the money, then they can improve their team, right? They can buy new players. And so to get a player to like, the level of Zava, and it's like unheard of, right? Like I don't know if it's even realistic to get a player like that in like the real world, but they needed something. And that was like my only issue with like the football aspect of it. It's like, obviously it's very unrealistic for a newly promoted team, to go and challenge for the title.
Yeah.
Especially with, okay, they had Zav at the beginning of the season, but they didn't make any roster changes, to really to improve, other than to get Jamie Tart like 2 seasons earlier.
Yeah.
And so like they struggled, and they did better with pretty much the whole team, with the same team, which I get is part of, the Ted Lasso experience, in a sense of, coaching and getting the best out of the players that they have, which I'm happy with, that they didn't like just go out and, spend a bunch of money and bring in players just to improve the team.
Sure. Any other thoughts about Zava? Because I had a good segue here. Oh, maybe it's not a good segue. I don't know. But you were talking about going off and doing some of the international football. Let's jump into Sam's arc and his Nigerian restaurant. I kept wanting to say Nicaragua. I'm like, nope, different continent.
I think Sam's restaurant, they built it up to be a bigger deal than it was. They had a couple like isolated episodes where it was a big deal, but Sam was for the most part sidelined this season.
Yeah. And that's what I wanted to point out, is that they bring this villain in for Sam only to have him go away the next episode. That apparently a food fight is enough for him to be like, well, I can't be a billionaire with my evil intention anymore. Sorry. Like, what was the point of that?
Yeah. I don't have an answer.
Yeah, I think they're trying to cram a lot into the season, and I think that they just didn't go far enough to develop that storyline, because I thought it was actually a good one. That was an interesting with the villain. Offering millions of dollars to keep him off the national team.
I think it shows there is corruption, especially in these other countries. I mean, you see it in some of these, African countries or this or that things that they can get away with, or they try to get away with on the international level. Excuse me, sorry, need to get some water or something. But my issue, or to go with like the food fight, Matt, I think the biggest thing is, in the real world, they try to do this also in like the Super League. I don't know, Paul, if you remember a couple years ago, like there was a talk of doing it, and the biggest uproar was from the fans. They're like, this is for the love of the sport, and not just, these are just money hungry owners, which is what they portrayed in this show as well. And I think Rebecca's saying that people get into this sport for the love of it, and this like their childhood, awe and love for the sport should be enough, and not just. I mean, they make enough money anyways. Like, the sport is for for the fans, and not so much for the owners, because I mean they make just enough money, and more money than they can ever hope and dream of. But
that's a really good segue, because I think we can talk about Rebecca, because Rebecca became the heart of the show this season. Ted, for being called Ted Lasso, this season was surprisingly absent on Ted Lasso emphasis, and that he kind of was just there, except for his like implementing the new coaching style or the new scheme that they did. But overall, it was Rebecca's heart that was the drive of this season, and there were some good parts of that, and she had some good moments. I especially liked the whole viewing all these, like as you were talking about, viewing all these rich white angry guys as kids again, and reminding that like under all of this exterior that there's still that same person that we were as a kid somewhere in there. I think that's a great way to show that, one of the few highlights of the season.
I think soccer I mean, outside the U.S. because there's issues with top end soccer and high level soccer in the U.S. At young ages, but across the world, like soccer is like everybody's sport. Like, doesn't matter if you're rich, poor, like you can play it and you can be good at it, and you have the same opportunities in a sense because all you need is a ball, and it's the world sport. And I think just showcasing that was really big for Rebecca, you know, and like showing that, you know, she's talking to a bunch of kids.
Yeah.
Any thoughts, Paul? I thought you were going to say something.
I was, yeah. I mean, with the reference to the Super League, I think if you're a like actual like football fan, that's gonna be a more meaningful storyline. Where if you don't necessarily understand that actually did kind of happen. In fact, 6 teams from the Premier League said we're joining this league. The fans lost their mind, and they ended up stopping it for the time being. At least I'm not convinced that it's completely over yet. So I think there is some significance there, and it's kind of having that context too that helps make it more meaningful.
I wish I would have cared more because, like you said a couple minutes ago, Paul, is that they were trying to jam too much into this season here, and there's a lot that it was like, because there's so much, it was hard to really nail down what was going on as much, at least emotionally, to like connect with something. And I think Rebecca had an arc that we could have connected with this season because her whole thing was detaching from Rupert and not letting him have the control over her that he has had throughout all these years since they left. And I think that's a very natural way to end her story. But it was hard for me to care about that just because it was the ADHD of everything pulling in all these different directions and okay, now what's the motivation here on this scene? And then, wait, now completely different. It was just hard to put all that together and stay focused for me on that.
I thought it was a little jarring with Rupert because, I mean, he's been a villain this whole time, and he's always been the kind of villain, like, he's 2 steps ahead. He's never shaken. He's like, he never has a big reaction to anything. All of a sudden, in the last minute, he becomes almost like a cartoon villain, like, you're going to win no matter what, and goes down and punches the guy or shoves his coach. And that's just not how Rupert operated. And it's weird to see him go from like the subtle mastermind to just frantic like that.
I think they more did that because I agree with you, Brian. It seems like out of character for him to go down there onto the field. Like,
yeah,
I agree. He's always that guy that's like tries to be 2 steps ahead, right? But I think they really wanted to showcase the difference of Rebecca finally like detaching from Rupert. And like, I feel like when they were, you know, playing against each other towards the end of the season, that was kind of, you know, the turning point and like the freeing of like he doesn't have the control over her anymore. And it kind of just got to him in a sense.
Maybe he realized that even though she had been growing the last 2 seasons, he could always get to her, and then he couldn't anymore. Is that kind of the read you guys got on that?
Well, I think that's part of it too, but I mean, you also factor in, they brought in some of the personal issues that he was going through. Like I think the like separation from his wife and and child was traumatic as well, and I think they were trying to show his life was more or less unraveling.
Yeah,
that's a good point.
Yeah, I got that too, especially with sexual misconduct allegations. That like that's the sort of guy that would have those sort of those allegations against him and has been operating that way 100%. That's the sort of person that would be that way. It felt a little tacked on to even include that, just because it's like that's an easy button to be like, just so we know, this guy is not so great. I'm like, I know that it's very realistic. 100% he'd be that way. But I don't know.
We knew he wasn't great. Now, like, we went into the season saying Rupert's the best.
Right. I mean, that's what he had issues with Rebecca, right? And then they split, was, for him not being faithful. So, I mean, they didn't really have to keep, ripping on that story, that arc, I feel like.
Rupert's cheating? What?
Right. Like, oh, it's such a shock. It really wasn't.
It was one of those sufferings of like, there are some times when Hollywood movies are like, hey, everything's going to work out in this nice tidy bow, and the guy that everyone was like against got fired because we're just against him. I was like, that's not always how it works in the real world. But them bringing that up was, I think, their way to say, and then he's going to get fired from his job and lose everything. And it's like, yeah, Rupert deserves that, but it just kind of feels tacked on just to give you a Hollywood ending where he got his comeuppance.
I suppose.
And I rarely pick on that because I get that these are movies and TV shows. It's media that happens. I think I'm just looking. I was already upset with this season, so I think I'm just adding to like, yeah, here's a tiny thing that can be PO'd about now.
Yeah.
Speaking of sidelined, no one was, but 10 minutes ago we were. Speaking of sidelined characters, what happened to Danny this season? Did he get Joey Tribbiani'd? Did he become dumber just to be a punchline?
Maybe, but Danny was never a huge focus character anyways. I mean, the biggest thing he had was when he kicked and killed that dog. But he was like...
What a sentence to take out of context for no one who's seen the show.
But I mean, he never had the emotional storylines. He's one of like the most recognizable players, but he was never like on the level of storyline as like, Roy or Jamie or Rebecca or any of these guys.
Yeah, the only storyline that they really had for him was with the goalkeeper, right? Like the Canadian, which again, I mean, being a real football fan, like the whole like international rivalry that it's part of they're one's playing for Mexico, one's playing for Canada, and that they're international rival. That was a clever little thing. But yeah, I mean, I kind of agree with Brian. There's not a lot of depth to his character, so that doesn't really bother me too much.
All right, let's talk about another. I'm sorry.
I want to record that and have that on loop of Paul saying, "I agree with Brian."
The only piece I'll say to that is I thought it was a good nod at. I mean, Mexico and Canada, they play in the CONCACAF region of global football where the U.S. plays, and Mexico and Canada are kind of in the U.S. So they're all the three of the big dogs, but the U.S. has proven to be the most up and coming right now. But I thought it was kind of cool to see like the Mexico-Canada rivalry because Canada has gotten a lot better at soccer in the real world, and Mexico isn't the powerhouse in this region anymore. And so I thought it was a good nod to Canada. I got their props because they've been very good for the program that they have, and so I thought it was a kind of a cool, real world type of arc as well. If you are a soccer fan in a sense. But
I know we probably don't need to talk about this character because we're talking about ancillary characters and they had so much to do this season anyway, but I didn't feel any weight behind a character that I actually really loved. I liked Trent Krim. I liked him in the first two seasons. And this season, sure, he's writing this book, but that's more of a capstone to the season than it is any arc or it have any urgency or weight in it. And I don't know what I'd change, but I wish they would have used him in a better way, in my opinion.
I completely agree.
Yeah, he wasn't used as a character. He was kind of used as almost like a prop or a plot device. He was used to support the one guy who was gay, and then he's basically just at the very end with the book in the finale. That's really. Other than that, he was just kind of there.
They wanted to write him in to be in more of the shows other than just a reporter. And so they're like, okay, we want him in more episodes. How do we do that? Okay, let's just have him be part of the team, and can showcase him more. Because I think people did like him or that character, in the first few seasons. They're like, well, we can't really have a reporter there like 24/7. Like, how do we?
Well, he's not writing about the team. He's a book writer writing about the team.
Right.
I thought it was good the first couple episodes, like where he had the tension with Roy, where Roy was like, nobody's saying anything to this guy. But I mean, I felt like they just like changed his character too much, that he went from this like hard hitting journalist, who was kind of surprised by Ted in the first season to just kind of being, I don't know, it lacking any real personality.
Yeah.
So then you talked about as agency to Colin, the gay character in this season. And again, that's another arc that I not only did I not like, but it actively made me upset in the story in the one episode where it was really all about him and all about like Isaac's reaction with a fan in the crowd. And then Ted telling that story of the Super Bowl of like, it's not enough just to sit there and be on their side. You have to do kind of what Isaac did, but maybe not in that same way. And it just was actively making me mad because I don't want that. I don't want to see like that sort of a storyline where it's like what you're doing isn't enough. You have to be so vocal about it. I'm like, I disagree with that. And people who know me know I disagree with that. And I don't want to have to say now I'm in the wrong for just simply disagreeing and keeping my mouth shut. So,
yeah.
And I'll add to that too. I think the whole idea of like this being a major issue in professional sports as a whole, I just out of curiosity, I looked it up. There is one out player in all of the major professional leagues in Europe that I could find. And it was like I think it was like the Russian league. So it's like maybe the 7th or 8th tier of leagues there. And it's like, this is a Hollywood issue. This is not a real soccer issue.
I feel like it's just an agenda in a sense that they're trying to push, in Hollywood. Because also like the Kiki storyline was like Keely, yeah, Keely.
We now call
who cares?
Either Keely, whatever. It's like I just felt like it was out of like left field in a sense, like just like added for no reason.
Especially because in between seasons they broke her and Roy up for no reason that we saw. They specifically took that relationship apart just so that they could have this storyline. Paul's turning on his lights. Okay, I was gonna you guys can't see it, but for a little bit, Paul had just been using the natural light from outside, and the light has been going down. And so when he last talked, his screen popped up, and it's just Paul sitting in shadow. You can't even see his face. And I'm like, for anonymity, Paul has decided not to reveal his real name here.
It's almost like distracting. He's like, you're acting like a villain. Is that more distracting than me doing laundry and pulling our headphones out?
No, not at all. But yeah, let's get into Keely, because I think there could have been, with her PR department, I thought that storyline could have had some weight, that it gets dropped in the middle of the season. I get that that's kind of the point, but that was one that I was following more than any of the other ones, and yet it was just there to get her to Jack. And again, we don't need it.
The best part of the whole like Keely arc was Barbara. Barbara was okay. And I will say this, my biggest issue with this season, despite all the other like arc issues that we're talking about, is that I just didn't find myself laughing as much as I have in the past.
100%.
It wasn't as funny. But I mean, Barbara was a great character. Like her deadpan, kind of dry, like quirkiness. I mean that fit this like style of show and this particular cast so well. And she was a great character, and it was really unfortunate that they went the whole Jack direction instead.
Yeah. Tell me I'm wrong that they forgot how to write for Ted. Am I wrong? I don't think I am.
So I have a theory with that. I think they really are setting up this show to be a spin-off somehow, to do more, but I think Jason Sudeikis is not going to be a part of it. So I think they kind of phased him out.
I can see that. What were you going to say, Brian?
What was I going to say? I forget. Oh, well, okay. On the subject of Ted leaving, I mentioned this to Andrew earlier. Okay, I get in the very end montage, they show what people are doing, and I get it was leading up to, we don't see Ted until Ted gets home with his son. I get that, but we see a flash forward of Coach Beard's wedding, and Ted's not there. Ted would fly out for Beard's wedding.
That's absurd.
Yeah. Like, Ted's never going to go back. You don't think he's going to take his son and go visit Richmond?
Beard was another character. I mean, we can talk more about Ted, but we can talk about Beard at the same time. Well, it's our podcast. We can do what we want. So I'll bring up Beard as well, that they leaned to his absurdity in a way that was just like, okay, this isn't believable anymore.
Mhm.
There has to be a level of believable absurdity, and Beard was just, I'm just going to act a certain way just to act a certain way. It's kind of like the movie Demolition Man, if you've ever seen it, where they talk about how there's these shells for toilet paper instead of how they go to the bathroom, and no one explains it. And I don't think the writers know anything. It was just absurdity for absurdity's sake, and that's what Coach Beard was this whole season.
Yeah.
So I would say the
Paul.
one redeeming thing with Beard this season, I really liked how they brought Nate back.
Yes.
With Beard, and how initially when he comes, it's like Beard is like, no way, not gonna forgive that guy, and Ted kind of convinces him to forgive him. And then when he comes back, he has this amazing conversation where he's like, I was in jail or whatever, and Ted came and got me a job. And I mean, hearing the whole storyline, finding out his name was Willis, which is which was referenced earlier when he says, "What you talking about, Willis?" I think in season 1 or 2, and everybody just thought that was a reference, but that's actually his name. I mean, that was a great arc. I thought that was like I said, I felt like they ended really well, because I think they tied a lot of these things together really well. But it took
that speech from Beard also made it understand more. In the very end, he's flying back with Ted, and then he realizes like he's breaking down, like, I want to be with Jane, but I feel like I'm going to be letting you down. Without that, you might be wondering, like, why is he so attached to Ted that he thinks he has to follow him instead of being with his girlfriend? That made sense. And then he needed that okay from Ted.
Yeah. The problem with that moment, though, is that because we had limited exposure to Jane, and everything that we get for the most part from Jane is through the eyes of Beard, and hearing kind of their weird, how they go together, like, whatever, I don't care, it's there as a couple, but it doesn't endear me to them as a couple, because again, it just feels absurd. It doesn't feel like a real couple, a real people that you care about. Whether Coach Beard gets on that plane or gets off that plane, I don't care. And I shouldn't feel that way at the series finale.
Like, you almost wish he didn't get off the plane, because, like you say, you don't see Jane a lot. Like, she pops up very rarely. And so all you hear is, like, what Beard says, and you think it's just, like, she's just torturing him in a sense, right? It's like, you almost hope that he just, like, leaves and, like, forgets about her, because it almost seems like she's kind of toxic for him. But, I mean, it's toxic and he likes it, and it's kind of just the absurdity, like you said, Matt, right? That just kind of goes overboard. But, part of me is just like, oh, thank goodness, like, Beard's going to leave and he can get away from Jane, in a sense.
But that was a great moment, and he does all that to get off the plane, and the steward's like saying to Ted, "Do you want to go to the hospital with your friend?" Like, no. What a jerk! Like that was a funny moment.
That's funny. You're right. All right. Well, I want to talk about the storyline that I wish there was a lot. We got, I think, 2 more that I can think of, and then you can add if there's others that I missed. But the Nate storyline, I felt just happened so fast. And I get that they had a lot going on this season, but I think Nate should have been, because of the way that they hyped it, and especially how they ended season 2, that there should have been a little more villain Nate and a little bit different of a turnaround. Because it's like, okay, you get fired, and then you hang out at your house, and your dad has a moment because he hears you play violin finally, and then everything's fine. Like, no, it's not fine. I like that all of his motivation was to impress the waitress and to get that table. I do like that they kept that consistent, but I just think that the Nate to villain, we probably needed another season of Ted Lasso to really give that arc weight, to let him be a villain for a season. And then the next season, he would come back and have his redemption.
So the only thing I would disagree with is nobody really bought Nate as a villain in the first place. No, I mean, that was my beef last time. We had a podcast, we talked about this. I'm pretty sure I said the idea of Nate being a villain is a little bit unbelievable. And so I guess, I mean, I don't know, you could make the case that's actually a more natural thing, is that he came to his senses sooner.
I didn't realize season 3 was going to be the end of it. And so I kind of, going into, like, how season 2 ended, I kind of thought going into season 3, like Nate going to this new position, like, West Ham. And I almost thought in the sense of the season's going to kind of end where the last game of the season is going to be West Ham versus Richmond. Richmond needs to win the game to like stay up in the league. So, I mean, I thought this was going to go way different this season. And like that would be kind of the turning moment where like Nate like has the like a turning point with like how he feels about Ted and like that relationship. And then like you said, Matt, like you almost need a full season of that, like coming to like a head and then like changing. Like it's almost too fast. So that's where I kind of thought the season was going to go, and like they'd have this like big moment at the end, because I feel like Nate had the beef with Ted for the sake of, Ted wasn't giving him the all the praise because Ted was dealing with his own stuff, and Nate almost felt like he was just being used for his tactics, and like then Ted would get all the glory. So I think I always thought like season 3 was going to be Ted was finally going to take that role of the football genius, or something would click, and then Nate would realize that, and it would go a different way. So I definitely thought that it was too rushed, like you said, Matt. I think they needed, because I agree, Paul. He's not really a villainous type of character. Like, I don't think you could have played that whole thing up the whole season, but I feel like you could have seen like his change of heart throughout the season as he watched Ted, grow and mature as a coach by himself.
Yeah, if you show us the insecurity of Nate behind the scenes after he does a villainous act, I think that's where he works as a villain, because that's real life villains, is people put this projection on and they hurt other people because of the pain that they're feeling, or because they feel they're not enough, or whatever the case may be. And that's 100% how Nate was. So I think we could have gotten that, but they had too much other stuff they're doing. So who was going to talk? So I cut someone off.
I was just going to add to that. I mean, I thought the whole idea of Nate turning on Ted was just a little bit unbelievable. Just because, I mean, he's not paying enough attention to me. Like, is he really that sensitive that it sends him into a complete tailspin?
When I thought the whole thing, like Nate was not the villain because he had his conflict with Rupert, who was the bigger villain, but that didn't really go anywhere. I mean, we saw Rupert starting to manipulate Nate, and it got to the point where like he tried to hook him up with these other girls when he met Nate's girlfriend. But I was expecting that to like he gets in trouble with his girlfriend because of that, but like nothing really came from that, and he just up and quit.
Thank you for reminding me, because that was a huge gripe I had. That was where that jumped the shark for me, and I was just completely out. Was between the end of that episode where he's out with the Rupert's like, actually, I'm going to leave early, and that's all he says. He doesn't say I'm leaving and like I'm quitting, or Rupert's like, well, then you're fired. Nothing. It goes from that to the beginning of the next episode. Nate's been fired, and I'm like, did we miss an episode? And I kept like looking at the thing. I'm like, did we miss something in between? Because it felt that like they were like this important thing that would affect this character, multiple characters, and the trajectory of these arcs just is going to happen in between episodes, and you don't get to see any part of it.
Yeah, right. So he was fired. I thought he quit.
I don't remember what it was.
I think he quit, but it kind of throughout the whole episode alludes to either or, right? You don't really know. I think finally towards the end, someone asked him like, "Oh, you got fired?" He's like, "No, I quit." But I think they could have played it where you almost see it in an episode between, right, Matt? Like,
yeah,
he goes back home. He tells his girlfriend. I can't think of her name. Is it? I'm thinking Jane, but that's Beards.
It starts with a J. Is it Jade?
Jade.
Yeah. Jane.
Jade. So like,
names, right?
I thought like he could have gone back home, told Jade what happened, like, and then like they talk about it or whatever, and then he just like, I don't think I can work for him, and he could have like this big like I quit type of moment. I don't know. I just was a little surprised at that as well. Like, I thought he did get fired.
What is that? This should be a video podcast.
Just Paul laid down, but in a very
Paul is doing the power move.
But our listeners don't know this. He's like laying down, and then Matt's busting out laughing while Andrew's talking and then starts taking his shirt off.
I'm just laughing too because Paul's got this big smile on his face. Like Paul knows exactly what he looks like. There's no doubt that like sure it might have started like I'm gonna lay down to get comfortable, but then Paul looks at the camera and is like, oh, I look like a model. I'm gonna smile about it.
Maybe I'll have to upload this part of the podcast as a video. I haven't done a video section in a little bit because like me narrating it is not doing it justice.
This is where you pay the $2.99 a month to get the video of the podcast.
This is our premium content, everyone.
Wait, if I'm gonna have to put more editing into making video, it's gonna cost more than $2.99
per user.
Per user.
Yeah, per user. So that's like 3 people.
Yeah, you have like 6 listeners.
That'll pay off my extra car loan.
There you go. All right. Well, let's talk about the arc that really should have been better than it was because these two are great characters together, and that's Roy and Jamie. And I liked these two together, but it kept falling flat. It wasn't like it was bad, but I just expected when they're on screen, like, okay, we're going to get something great. And then we just got, oh, they're there. To me, that's how I felt.
Well, it ended with them fighting over Keeley, which was so interesting.
Well, and like, sure, that's where you could have seen it. And maybe that's like, I guess you could call it a little lazy, but even then, like you've seen that before and it's fine, but just make it interesting, make it exciting. And I want to see it be funny because that's what sitcoms do. They do like the same thing that you've seen before, but they just make it funny along the way.
I think they had really good content, right? Because Jamie was dealing stuff with his father, which kind of gets resolved, at the end. But he was kind of looking for a father figure in a sense. Roy's this rough, tough guy, kind of being that father figure and like, helping him, grow. At the same time, Roy's trying to figure out himself out and how to be a better coach, right? And he's connecting with Jamie. Like they had so much material they could work with that I loved the scenes that they were together because they could have done so much. And I like that they were working together and he was pushing Jamie to be better than Zava in a sense because that's what Jamie's issue was. And I think that helped Jamie push to like be better was like, okay, Zava's this guy is he's him, right? In the modern tech terminology. And he's like, if you want to be him, you have to put the work in it. You have like the natural talent. You just need now to couple that with Roy's like work ethic.
I would say I would slightly disagree with Matt how you put it because I don't feel like those scenes necessarily fell flat. I think there just wasn't enough of them, and because I think that was probably one of the few times this season where like I laughed, out loud, like on a regular basis when it was Jamie and Roy together because they just play so well off each other. And it was like, could we just eliminate a couple of the storylines and like, focus down on the ones that really matter? Like the whole Jack thing, you could just skip that entire thing. It was completely unnecessary. Didn't need it at all. And like even like the Colin thing, like you could easily have eliminated that because they didn't really do anything with that either. So cut down a few of those storylines and focus on the most important things, which I thought Rebecca's storyline was really good. I thought Roy and Jamie together were great. And then obviously you need some sort of resolution with Nate. And if you could have done those 3 things, I think you could have had a really good season.
And if you could have written Ted a little bit, because like I feel like this show should be really easy to write at a certain point, at least scenes, because pairing Roy and Jamie together, that does all of the legwork for you. And then you just think like role play it with another writer and just have fun with it. And I just didn't feel the fun in the writing like I did in season 1 and 2. And maybe a part of it is like now we've got the writer strike going on. So maybe it was they're getting to a point of like they had to churn this out quicker than they wanted to. And they're like, all right, we'll just throw something together. And they didn't give it everything that they could have because I felt it. But maybe that's just me.
Another minor thing with Roy, this is super minor. At the very end when Roy says something super ominous like, all right, what's gonna happen or whatever, and then everyone breaks into like their goodbye song.
Mhm.
I thought that meant that we were leading to that Roy was gonna come in and like actually be part of the song, but they never did. Like Roy was definitely in on it, but how good of a moment would that be? You expect to see everyone else playing along with it, but you never expect Roy. I thought at the very end it'd be like Roy would pop out. He'd either be super good or super bad at singing, and either one of those would be hilarious.
Yeah.
I think his coming out was kind of when he joined the Diamond Dogs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, it's like he finally like felt like he could in a
Yeah.
sense.
He always knew he could. He never wanted to open up.
Yeah. I felt like this as I was watching the song, I just was thinking like The Office did it better. You know, like sure, okay, straight out of Sound of Music, great, whatever. But like I didn't feel anything during that song except for maybe like, all right, get this over with.
I didn't hate it. I think it would have been better if it was bigger, if it was the team, and then like you bring in, like I said, Roy, and you bring in like Healy and Rebecca and Higgins, and like if it was like everybody but Ted and Beard, I think that would have been better, and that would have been maybe felt more kind of like The Office.
Maybe.
Which I will say with The Office is Dwight should have been part of that, but there's a different conversation for a different show.
That's fair. What was, I know that that's a different conversation, a different show, but remind me, what was he doing at that time?
Remember they started the Dundies at the restaurant, and Dwight got mad and stormed off before they went back to the office to finish it because they got kicked out of Chili's because of D'Angelo was being crazy.
I thought there was also like a behind the scenes of like why Rain wasn't able to be there too.
Oh, there might have been. I can't tell you.
Now I'm so now I want to know. So great. That's our trivia.
I bet if you go to the Office Ladies episode about that, they talk about it. I don't remember, but I'm sure they mentioned it in there.
I bet. All right. Were there any arcs that I missed? I know we kind of skipped over Ted, but we talked about the football part of it, which I guess is his arc. But
I don't have an arc. I have a moment, one of the few like really funny moments, and actually it's a character who didn't get an arc this season, which is Higgins.
I love Higgins.
Yeah, a great moment is they were doing a Diamond Dogs, and Higgins wasn't there, and then all of a sudden, like, you've no idea where he was or how he heard it, but he's like just starts sprinting in. Okay, I made it. It's like, that was funny.
That is great. If they do a spin-off of this show, the only thing I want Higgins and Barbara to be working together for the same person and watching their dynamic as they both respond in their very different ways. I think that dynamic would be really good.
I don't think it would work though. I think if it's all new people plus Higgins and Barbara, it would be like Saved by the Bell, the new class. It's like, hey, look, it's the same show with not as good characters, but they have Screech and Mr. Belding. No one cared.
Well, fine then. I just like Higgins, and I think Higgins and Barbara I don't think they had any screen time together.
No.
And I think if you paired them together, they could have some interesting stuff.
Oh yeah, I mean, those two would be interesting characters, but you can't build a show around just those two characters, and no one would care about anything else happening.
Watch me.
Okay.
I guess a story arc in it was kind of Ted's family and like the new guy and his ex. Did they ever actually? Yeah, they finalized the divorce, right?
Yeah. Let's not gloss over that. That is their marriage counselor. What a terrible human being to be the former marriage counselor that they got divorced and then he started dating her. Awful.
And realistically, probably before, right? I mean,
yeah. Well, and with that, like at the end, they made kind of a big deal. Everyone's watching the final game, and is it Michelle and is it Henry? Is that his name? Yeah. Michelle and Henry super into the game, and he's in the back like, I don't care about sports, whatever.
Oh, it's gonna be 0-0. It's gonna be a boring game. Yeah.
And then I thought something was gonna come to that. I thought they were gonna be like have some moment where they realize like, I didn't think her and Ted were gonna get back together, but I thought maybe she would realize like he's being kind of a jerk about this game. Maybe I don't need to be with him, and then just nothing came from it.
Yeah,
I kind of was expecting it to. We're in that moment. It was like, wow, he's kind of just being like a complete jerk. Like I get like he's the ex-husband, right? But I mean, show a little bit of like enthusiasm for the girl that you are dating, and her son, right? Like
Yeah.
a little bit more than, oh, it's gonna be a boring game, da da da,
I mean,
this and that. But
yeah.
I thought the same thing. I was like, okay, is she gonna realize that, Ted's changed? And I mean, part of me was like, the hopeless romantic was like, hey, hopefully they get back together type of thing.
Yeah.
And maybe that she would like move over there with Henry and like,
yeah, and then he keeps
the job, especially after like Rebecca was like, is there anything we can do to keep you to stay? She's like, talking to Higgins, we can have enough money that I can make you the highest paid, coach in the league.
And I think that could have been really interesting if this season, instead of her dating the third therapist, that we find out one of the reasons they broke up is because she felt like he ran away and he abandoned the family, abandoned her to do this job. And then that would make sense for him to come back because he'd get the second chance at that choice and be like, you're given all the money and instead you choose her and your son. I think that could have been a really good arc. We've seen it before, sure. But I still think that there's mileage on that sort of storyline, and we could have gotten a better emotional ending for him.
And with the part where he's watching the game afterwards and he's like on his phone because he's completely disinterested, that's probably a pretty accurate depiction of just about any other American football fan. That's like, oh, soccer's so boring. So
that's what I say.
If you ever say soccer is boring,
me.
Go watch the USA-Mexico game that just got played. If you want a game that is intense and everything beautiful about the game, go watch that.
No.
And maybe everything ugly about the game.
And ugly, but it's like everything that is like, that is what, I mean, there's some great rivalries out there, but the USA-Mexico never ceases to bring so much fun and energy.
Like, that's great, Andrew. I love it, Brian. So go watch that game. No. Just slip it in there. Under the radar.
I remember like going in, like after the game was done, like going and laying in bed, and my wife was asleep, but I had to wake her up, and I was like, hey, USA won 3-0. I was like, if you ever wanted to watch a soccer game, that's the match to watch. Like, it had everything.
Honey, if you really loved me.
She watched like the first 10 minutes.
I'll be fair. I make fun of soccer, but I used to say the exact same thing about American football before I started watching that. And now, Bears fan, baby. So,
Andrew, I thought that story was going to end with you saying that she was like, I have 3 kids. Why are you waking me up for a soccer game?
That's also a fair.
It's like at the same time. But
all right. Well, anything else that we missed? Sounds good.
Yeah,
I'd like to hear everybody's favorite moment from the entire series. I'll go first since I'm springing that on you.
Okay.
My favorite moment of the entire series was when Higgins had all the players over at his house, and they got to be part of his family. It was Christmas, I think, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, that was so great. That was probably the best part of the entire series.
That's my favorite emotional moment. My favorite just joke, because it caught me by surprise, was Beard and Ted. And Beard's like, who was president in the 80s? Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan? The actor? Every time we talk about Ted Lasso and favorite moments, that I bring that up because I loved it so much.
You would like the Back to the Future reference.
Of course. I watched it with my my 2 youngest over the weekend on Father's Day. So
I'm gonna go way back. I think it's episode 1. It's when he drinks the fizzy water for the first time, and then he drinks it again, like the next to calm his coughing.
Yeah.
Like, I thought that was just and that's what I think made season 1 so great. Like, where just the little things like that made you actually laugh. Mm-hmm. Felt like it got more serious in a sense, and kind of turned away from a comedy as the seasons went on. But
I'll go with more of a serious, emotional moment was when it's at Rebecca's dad's funeral when everyone starts singing the Rickroll song.
I barely remember that.
Never gonna give you up.
Well, I remember the song.
I thought maybe and she starts singing it, and then she breaks down. I think Ted starts singing it, and then everyone else joins in. Or no, Sam, because that was the weird
Yeah,
Rebecca Sam relationship.
that was kind of.
Yeah, that didn't work, but oh well. All right, well there you go. That's it for Ted Lasso. We're closing the book on it, and we're opening the book on the next spin-off show that's not having Ted Lasso in it, but still might be called Ted Lasso because marketing doesn't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
So
I don't think if they do a spin-off without Ted, I don't know if it would do good.
No.
Yeah, he's the magic of it.
The Office seasons 8 and 9 were the best ones. I mean,
And the final season of that 70s show, peak television.
yeah.
All right. Well, we had last week for our trivia, we talked about the TV show the Breaking Bad. We talked about the episode Ozymandias, and we did like a deep dive into that episode. And so if you haven't listened to that, that's like the best episode ever of television. So go watch that episode because we really dive into it.
But don't make that your first episode of Breaking Bad.
Yes, also don't do that. I'm saying listen to our episode where we talk about Ozymandias. But
Yes.
we asked a question at the end of the episode where he said in that episode they referenced two characters that were not in the episode. Which two characters do they reference? And those characters. Well, you guys are here. Do you know? Do you remember?
No.
Actually, we said it at the beginning when Brian showed
I
up.
was saying,
We gave
you
the
said-
answer.
And you guys still don't remember.
I wasn't paying attention.
That's fair. I wouldn't either. It's Bogdan and Jane. They are referenced. I did say last week when we came up with this question that there is a picture of Andrea and her son that they show to Jesse. So I don't know if you would technically include that, but we didn't because you see the picture and they're not actually said referenced or anything. So
yeah.
All right, Brian, give us your trivia this week.
All right. And here's the thing. I proud of myself. I caught this, and then I went to double check that I saw it correctly, and I did. In the finale, there is a visual reference to a popular 80s sitcom. And what popular 80s sitcom was referenced visually in the finale?
It's not that 70s show, so don't guess that.
Nope.
All right. Well,
I told Andrew earlier, but do you guys have any idea?
I don't know.
Okay. I'll tell you guys after we're done.
I like how a series about soccer doesn't even have a soccer trivia question to end it.
Was it in his office?
No.
That I didn't think
you're
it
not gonna
was.
get it,
Good. Clearly, I didn't believe that. All right. Well, next week we are talking.
Can I give a bonus trivia question to all the
Yes,
soccer
please,
fans
no.
out
please.
there?
Okay.
Paul,
If you got
Paul
one.
is
If you
just
got
like
one.
soccer.
Obviously, season 3 ends with Man City winning the league.
Obviously.
So, spoiler alert if you haven't watched season 3. But in the real world this year, Man City did win the league. Who was the last team other than Man City to win the Premier League?
New York Knicks.
I think Paul knows this based on his.
Thought Paul would like that trivia question.
I do like that trivia question
Was that-
for multiple reasons.
Oh,
So
Minnesota Vikings.
Minnesota Vikings,
Premier
Premier League champions.
Hey, speaking of sports teams, guys, last week the Golden Knights won the Stanley Cup. The Golden Nuggets won an NBA title, and National Treasure won the Triple
Golden
Crown.
Nuggets.
Yeah, haven't you heard that?
Golden Nugget. I thought they were just called the Nuggets.
They
just
are,
call them
but
the
that's
Nuggets.
is that not a nickname? I've heard people refer to them as the Golden Nuggets.
What was the last one you said?
And the National Treasure horse won the Triple Crown all in the same week. So if you can think of any like money related teams or like the Golden Gophers, I think they're going to win this year. So put a bet on them because that's going to happen. So
Okay, nobody's ever called them the Golden Nuggets.
well then
but,
why have I looked it up? Whatever.
I mean, it's a reference to gold nuggets, sure, but
Yeah.
Then Golden State Warriors are going to win it next year.
Yeah.
Yeah. they won it the year before.
I looked it up. Denver's Golden Nuggets. That's what it says.
All right.
All right, Matt.
Hey, man,
You're the basketball fan, so
Yeah, I mean, clearly.
it's definitely not me.
I don't know why people say that they call it that then. So I I'm not a basketball fan, as you know. I've just
We know. We clearly know now. You call them the Golden Nuggets.
Golden State Nuggets. That's what
Golden
they are.
State.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for ruining that, Paul. I appreciate it.
Anytime.
We'll see.
All right. Thanks, guys.
We'll see if you're back on the episode on the show ever again. All right. Well, until next time, I'm Matt.
I'm Brian.
And he's
Paul.
Andrew. And no, you don't get it, Andrew.
I'm Nate.
And we're reminding you to stay tuned and keep watching.
Oi.
Oh.